The following is a special video presentation of the Hennepin County Library.
Hi, welcome to a discussion with Judith Viorst. I'm Eileen Cavanaugh from the Hennepin County Library Program Office, and my guest today has written a variety of award-winning pieces, including The 10th Good Thing About Barney, Yes, Married, and Necessary Losses. She is also a contributing editor to the Red Book magazine, and the book that we're going to discuss today is her new novel, Murdering Mr. Monty. Welcome, Judith. We're so glad to have you with us.
Very pleased to be here.
Well, Murdering Mr. Monty is your first novel, is that so?
Yes, it is. It was very scary, but I decided every writer, I think, has the fantasy that they're going to write a novel someday, and I decided the time had come.
What made you go off onto this breaking new ground?
Well, first of all, I got very interested in this character. She's a woman like a lot of us, except that she is an excessive version of it. And I wrote the first line of something like, I'm not the murdering kind, but I'm planning to kill Mr. Monty because he's doing harm to my family. By the time I got to the end of the first paragraph, I had this woman in my head. I knew what she thought. I knew that she was a lovable family lady, but right on the borderline between that and major pain in the butt. And I knew how she sounded and who she was, and I just went with it. Figuring out why she wanted to murder him and why, being a nice, respectable married woman, she nonetheless had slept with 3 different men within 24 hours shortly before her 46th birthday. I was as curious as I hope my readers will be to find out what happened.
Well, we should tell the viewing audience, perhaps, that Murdering Mr. Monty isn't really a murder mystery. On the other hand, it's not really a book of humor. How would you describe it?
Well, I think it's I guess it's a romp. It's a kind of a wacky, playful book about the wish to control, about the wish to, to tell your children what to do, even when they're too grown up for you to be telling them. The wish to offer, which my heroine calls constructive interventions. The wish to give advice to the entire immediate world, and all of these things taken to an extreme, the passionate wish to protect your child, even to the extent that you'll kill for the child.
Do you think in the United States today that parents, as a general rule, are overprotective of their children, solve too many of their problems?
I think there is some of that. One of the ways I learned about the character in this book was I read a column for Red Book magazine, and I did an interview with a whole bunch of women on the subject of, do you love your children more than you love your husband? And I started listening to what middle class, solid, soft-spoken, respectable women were prepared to do for their kids. Rush in and intervene and scream at people and make demands and be pushy in ways they would never be. And not just when their kids were little, but when their kids got older, and when their kids got much older than that, to the point where they helped them to get jobs, they helped them live better than maybe they could on their own salary. We probably do coddle our kids a lot more than we were coddled. We also probably intrude on them in ways that we would never have tolerated in our own lives. I can't believe it. I have a 32-year-old, a 30-year-old, a 26-year-old, and I'm forever having this inner conversation with myself in which I tell myself, mind your own business, they're grown-up people, they're going to live their own lives, they're going to make their own mistakes. And while I'm having this great inner conversation with myself, out of my mouth is coming all kinds of instructions, advice, helpful hints. I've got a kid living in New York who will not buy bars for the window by his fire escape. And he is, every time I make my little bye-bar speech, he says, "Mom, I really respect you for what you're saying, and I appreciate your concern. No." I said, "This is not the end of it. You'll be hearing from me again." And I cannot give up on it, because I'm right and he's wrong, even if he's 30.
And maybe when he's 35.
You think so? Maybe you could talk to him.
You've written such a variety of things. This is a novel, but you've also written a lot of poetry that many people know, How to Be Hip Over 30 and Yes Married, and you've written children's books that are famous. You've written interviews, you've written biographical and psychological things, and you've written magazine articles. How does someone maintain such a wide variety of creativity that allows that?
I love that. I mean, I love exercising all of the different writing muscles that I have, and not staying with one quote unquote sure thing. I love writing the poetry because I love the challenge of the compression of it, of trying to get a whole lot of feelings and ideas to converge on one word, one phrase. I like the Red Book articles because then you take some of the same issues I deal with in poetry and you can expand, tell anecdotes, and interview people. I love writing for children because I tap into the little fresh 6-year-old kid in myself, and I find that capital I voice looking around at the kids I know, the kids that were in my own life, but also the kid in me. And that's a whole other kind of experience. And after I had done all of that kind of writing for a long time, I went back to school to study at the Psychoanalytic Institute in Washington, and out of that study came a great interest in wanting to write about what I had learned. And that's when I decided I was going to write Necessary Losses, which is a rather quite serious book about understanding human development in terms of the losses we go through. And at the time I was writing that book, or decided I wanted to write that book, a couple of my friends said, "Why are you doing this? Everybody likes you for your funny poetry and for your children's books. Why would you get into this kind of heavy-duty subject?" It's because I wanted to try something I had tried before that I had a great passion and interest in. I've even been involved with a musical, which was shown in New York and California. I'm outrageous. I want to try before I go, I'd like to try every kind of writing there is.
So you're definitely not an author who's going to be slotted in to a particular genre of fiction or
I don't think so. I don't want to be. I want to be willing also to try and not be scared to fail, and not be, not to say, well, this is sure, this everybody likes this, stay with this. A friend of mine, a wonderful writer, once said, when we started out as writers, we had this feeling of nothing to lose. We had no reputations to protect. We had no publishers to impress because we didn't have any publishers. And we had nothing to lose, and it was a freeing kind of feeling. And she said, we've got to hang on to that as we get older, as we get more established. We always have to find ourselves back with that nothing to lose feeling and be willing to take risks.
The premise of Murdering Mr. Monty is the two families, the Jewish family, Brenda Kovner's family, and the Catholic family, Mr. Monty's family, whose offspring are planning to marry each other.
That's right.
And Mr. Monty is not pleased, and he's out to ruin especially Brenda's life.
Well, he says, when I'm unhappy, everybody's unhappy, and soon there are real estate scams, there are malpractice suits, and while he starts receiving death threats by phone, by fax, by mail, Brenda, his mother, is frantic. She feels, she's got to save her baby boy. I mean, he's in his 20s, but he's her baby boy, and since she has a great deal of hubris about being able to constructively intervene, she's going to go and do it. Now, I have to tell you that
Brenda is the can-do woman.
She calls herself a can-do woman. There are those who would call her controlling. She rejects that. But I was a year and a half into writing this book the characters were all set, the plot was set. My young boy who wants to marry the girl is in love with this Catholic girl having this problem, and my own youngest son falls in love, who is Jewish, falls in love with a Catholic girl with dark red hair, as she has in my novel, and they've just gotten married. And so here's this book coming out. I had to run around and explain to my future daughter-in-law and her father that I had neither adulterous nor homicidal designs on him, and to explain to the whole family that I started this novel well before Alexander and Jane had met.
This is art imitating life.
Absolutely, it was life imitating art, because the art came first, the life came after, and it was absolutely wild to have this. Now, in real life, the two families get along very, very well. There was not, a flutter of unease about this match. These are two kids who really belong together. We're two families that believe that religion should support families, not divide families. And there's nobody in the book nobody in real life like Mr. Monty, who is a burly, bullying, bossy kind of guy who has to have his way at all costs, nor would I like to think of myself as quite as controlling and outrageously intrusive as my heroine, Brenda.
I was going to ask you a question that I'm sure everybody has asked you, and that is Brenda Kovner at least partially Judith Viorst?
Well, there are some pieces. There are some pieces of me, but again, while I and many women might have little fantasies of, something wicked with Robert Redford or Paul Newman, Brenda acts on her impulses. While I might like to see a large truck rolling over somebody that was giving my son a hard time, Brenda goes out and does something about it. She plays out the fantasies that I might have over the years. I also confess that, though I don't think I'm as controlling as Brenda, you might want to check my husband and kids on that, I do have a reminder sign in my office somebody gave me several years ago, which says, "For peace of mind, resign as general manager of the universe." And I've got that sign in my office, and when I came to write about Brenda, I decided that her husband was going to give her a T-shirt with that same admonition written on it. I think I've taken the advice. Brenda does not take the advice.
In fact, Jake, Brenda's husband, commits adultery in a fit of pique because he regards Brenda as the general manager of the universe.
Well, she is driving him absolutely nuts. She, as he says, she is out of control with her need to be in control. I mean, she is a woman who, after advising her friend, Cookie Beckerman, poor Cookie wound up growing a mustache because Brenda knew better than her endocrinologist. Brenda is also somebody, at one point she thinks she is going to have a very short life because she's got a brain tumor, and she actually sits down and writes letters to her sons to be opened at future birthdays into their 20s, 30s, and 40s. Don't mumble, don't slouch, floss now or be sorry later, marry for character rather than for breasts, and remember that your mother, though dead, still loves you. I mean, here's a woman so interested in telling people what to do that she's got from beyond the grave, she's going to be reaching out with instructions. So her husband has a legitimate point, but it is, I mean, in addition to murder and adultery, it is a book about a marriage that I hope people will care about and root for, and about the imperfections of marriage. I have a love scene which seems very appropriate to the way love scenes are in real life, not, moonlight and roses and diamonds, but the two of them standing side by side, brushing their teeth and spitting into the sink as they tell each other they love each other.
But the same sink. But I think we all can recognize pieces of ourselves, and as a matter of fact, when I was in the process of reading Murdering Mr. Monty, several people happened to tell me about problems they were having with their adult children, and my response to all of them was, read Murdering Mr. Monty, because you see all these problems that you're talking about, but it's funny, you can see them in a kind of perspective. And so lots of converts already.
Oh, well, that's very nice. I think it is a big issue. Certainly one that I and my women friends talk about all the time. At what point do you back off, take yourself out of the picture, let your kids go? Is there such a thing as a retired parent? Well, the answer to that is no. There is no such thing as a retired parent. We are parents for life. We don't say, okay, you're on your own. When they're in their 20s, you think you've got to stop holding their hand when they cross the street. But if you look at a kid in their 20s crossing the street, they are not looking that carefully to the left and to the right. But at a certain point, you cannot hold their hand when they cross the street. And I think we are always wrestling with how much hand-holding we're going to do as our kids get older. I mean, my son Alexander used to complain. I was always calling up with a little bit of advice on a couple of crucial matters that I worried about in his bachelor days. And so he started greeting me. I would call up and I'd say, honey. And he'd say, what is it, Mom? Health insurance or AIDS? You knew I was going to give him a speech.
As in pay for it, or
That's right. Make sure you pay your and practice safe sex. And I know I shouldn't do that. I mean, I know I shouldn't do that. I mean, I know I shouldn't. I don't know how he's still willing to be my son.
But you'd feel bad if he didn't pay his health insurance.
I'd feel terrible. But do I have to call him up as I did a few years ago, with a suggestion? There was this long silence after I made the suggestion. He said, excuse me, Mom, let me get this straight. You are calling me to remind me to be on time for my job interview. I mean, what a great idea, Mom. I never would have thought. I really appreciate that. I'm making it sound as if Alexander's the only one I give advice to, but my other two sons, Tony and Nick, also hear from me. Nicholas was very annoyed when he came to visit me in Washington, D.C., and we went to the movies, and he got into the car without his coat. Now, how do you stand there watching somebody go out into the freezing cold without their coat and not say something? So I said, take your coat, it's freezing. He said, thanks for the information, I'm not taking my coat. And I said, you can't go, you're really crazy. You can't go. And he said, I cannot believe I am a 30-year-old person having a take your coat discussion with my mother. And I absolutely sympathize with it. If my parents had done it to me, I would have had a fit. But I do not know how to not say that to him. I'll work on it, but I haven't learned to not say it yet.
The big temptation of parents. I used to think that when I grew up, I would have children, and then the children would grow up, and they would leave me alone, and I would be alone, and I would have a whole new wonderful life. But that hasn't happened, as I'm sure it hasn't happened for you and hasn't happened for Brenda Kovner. I'm wondering whether is it our generation, because children now need so much more education, they live at home
moving
longer,
back home or coming back?
Or did other generations suffer with this as we did?
Well, I think at one point, a while back, kids lived with their parents till they got married. In my generation, moving away from home was, the crucial act of independence. You certainly couldn't consider yourself a grown-up. You certainly couldn't have any kind of sexual freedom if you were living in your parents' house. Here, Brenda has her son Wally at home. He's upstairs. He's getting his master's in social work. And she can't tell him to clean up the room. She can't tell him it's an icy night out, don't drive. I mean, what are you going to do with a grown child who's living at home? And then her older son winds up at home for a while. She doesn't like anybody he's dating. She complains that there are women whose hair is longer than their skirts, and none of them they're glitzy women who will not be fit candidates to be the mother of her future grandchildren. But she can't say, I don't like this person you're dating. At a certain point, what you have is maybe the worst of both possible worlds. You have your kids at home as adults. You can't tell them how to live their lives in great detail, and yet you can't turn off that passionate, protective feeling which makes most of us open our mouths too much, and makes Brenda not only open her mouth but try frantically and very artfully to kill Mr. Monty.
How far should a parent go? And I'm asking you this as Judith Viorst, not as Brenda Kovner. I sort of think I know the answer for Brenda.
Well, I have two answers to that. I mean, I have the right answer and the true answer. I mean, how? I don't think we're allowed to kill for our children. I really think that is prohibited.
Not even Mr. Monty.
Not even Mr. Monty. No. We're gonna have to figure out another way to do it, or else it's going to be a very sordid world that we're living in. But I do think that it's almost impossible to turn off that umbilical, to clip that umbilical connection, to back off as much as we might think is right. And again, when I interviewed a whole bunch of women on the subject, they will go to lie, steal, cheat, and maybe not kill for the kids, but die for their kids. It starts when the kids are young and they're calling up the neighbor and saying, "How could you not have your daughter invite my daughter to that sleepover birthday? How cruel, how terrible." I mean, we wouldn't do that for anybody else. We wouldn't do it for ourselves. We wouldn't do it for our husbands. We wouldn't do it for our parents. And so we try to protect them emotionally. We try to protect them physically from all kinds of dangers. I remember a friend of mine used to describe when he had his first child, that the child would be crawling along the floor. This is a father, not even a mother. He'd be crawling along behind the child with his hands up in case the chandelier fell down. He'd catch it. And we have this feeling that we want to throw ourselves between our children and all harm. It's a very powerful yearning, and I think we can go only so far. We certainly can't commit murder, and we probably have to back off well before that. I find it hard when my kids work or live in scary neighborhoods. I would, let me raise the money and help them pay for a nicer place in a safer neighborhood. And get an armed guard to walk with them at night? You can't do that. It hurts, because there was something so powerful about that wish to protect your kid. But you can't do it, and I don't think you should do it.
And on the other end of that, there's when does this kid learn how to make his own decisions and make his own mistakes and
Absolutely.
find his own solution that may be, unfortunately, very different from mother's solution?
Absolutely. And to have the kind of competence and confidence that says, I can handle myself out here in this world. I don't need my mother to do this for me. I don't need my parents to fix it for me. And if I stumble and fall, I can get up and brush myself off and get on with my life.
There are a lot of fun paradoxes in this book. I think about Brenda, who is the can-do woman, but she's kind of unglued.
Well, she messes up in a major way a lot of the time, because her conviction that she knows what to do is way ahead of her actually knowing what to do. And I think she has this illusion of control, which comes with making lists, A, B, C, D, and E, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, here it is, okay, I know what I'm doing, and I'm off and running, and it is an illusion of control. She also gets a lot of ideas for murdering Mr. Monty by research purposes. She takes this very seriously. How does a middle-class woman know how to kill somebody? What do? You go and you rent movies from the video store, and you study murder movies, how it's done. Suspicion, the postman always rings twice, the bride wore black. How do we kill somebody? I got my husband really unnerved, because I, like the heroine, was researching how you kill somebody. And at one point I was on the telephone with my internist as my husband walked by saying, "Now you're sure that this poison is undetectable and kills immediately? And you couldn't get caught?" And Milton's saying, "What is going on here?"
As I read the book, I tried to think about what made this book so funny, and I couldn't really say this is what I think. There are so many things brought in, like the old movies that she watches, and the lengths to which this woman will go, and there's just a lot of politically correct stuff. There's a dog in here who would drive anybody crazy.
Well, the dog, I mean, the dog was an amazing experience for me. I am not particularly into dogs. Forgive me, dog lovers. I'm a cat person. I don't mind a dog. A dog should, shouldn't pin me against the wall, should not lick all the makeup off my face, should not eat my shoe, and I can coexist with a friend's dog. So I was absolutely amazed when in chapter 4 of this novel, this large Great Dane called Hubert, after Hubert Humphrey, walks into my novel, sits down, will not budge, will not get out of my novel, and I've got to write this dog into my novel. He belongs to the sister, Brenda's sister, Rosalie, and there's this whole sibling rivalry theme between Rosalie and Brenda, but also between Rosalie's daughter and the dog, because Rosalie treats the dog much better than she treats the daughter. So there's a little competition between the daughter and the dog.
We've talked a lot about mothers and their protective feelings. Have you found, now Jake is an interesting person too. Jake is the competent pediatrician, and another paradox. He's smooth. But he really can't manage his own children either.
But he doesn't want to. He's willing. He is the person who's willing to let them make their own mistakes. I mean, back off is something that Jake would say very comfortably to himself and to Brenda. Brenda does not know from back off.
But Jake, it seems to me, wouldn't have this nice, cozy, intimate relationship with his sons.
No, Brenda has this whole rap about how they're mother's sons and father's sons, and Wally, who is outrageously her favorite, is definitely a mother's son. He talks to her about his problems and knows that she will be helpful. When he falls in love with Josephine, Josephine wants him to talk to her about his problems, and he starts drawing away, as is proper developmentally, and Brenda gets a little resentful.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but maybe this is a good time to stop, because I think we've left everybody up in the air sufficiently that they'll want to go out and read Murdering Mr. Monty and solve all their family problems in the reading. Thank you so much for being with us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
A presentation of the Hennepin County Library.